and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have any amendment to our agenda?
There are
Okay,
none.
so would anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I will make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second that. Okay, motion by Ron and seconded by Carol. The agenda is approved for the evening. Next, we will
We have
consider,
to take a vote on that.
oh, sorry, that's right, see, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Okay.
I guess I didn't need to say that.
I withdraw my name.
He just got to be a horse.
I am. I wish I could. I wish I was that quick.
I know, my dad, sorry. Okay, with that being said then, motion carries. And Robert, I'm gonna pass it over to you to consider minutes, bills, and financial reports.
Yeah, there's a couple things in the bills. You'll see one, I think, that we would draw attention to is DMAC for the assessor PSEO tuition. And the other one is probably will draw attention is to Riddell Company. That's for order of new football helmets. We pay for that out of the general fund because we're allowed to, but we're on a cycle that all of our helmets are reviewed because of concussions, and with the ability to do that with lawsuits, we want to make sure that those are on a program where they're reviewed every year. So anything that's damaged goes out. Anything that's on a 2-year cycle will go out. If it hasn't been done in 2 years, it'll be done every other year. Then there's a life cycle of 12 years, so that's 6 times. And like this year we had not done that for the junior high helmets. So we had to order 30 junior high helmets this year because the last time we ordered them just in 2 years, we hit that 12-year mark. So we had to take 28 helmets, I think, out of service, so we ordered 30.
So how many helmets did you buy out of that?
There's 30 in junior high ones, and I can't remember how many back were in there. But a lot of them, some of that is probably reconditioning. Some of it will be new helmets that we'll see another invoice for later. The reconditioning is usually less. The new helmets, obviously we had to order them in December in order to even be assured that we would get them in August, and we're still not really assurance of that. So some of them are very difficult to come by. So that's why that's there.
So are they like 150 or 200?
Oh, they're in the $375 range.
I just wanted to ballpark. I just didn't know. Just curiosity.
That's why we went from activity fund. That's why the state allowed us. Used to everything had to be paid out of activity fund for that sport. Because it's a safety issue, that it can be paid out of general fund now. So that's one of the things that I talked to Mac about, some different stuff today, even to try to boost that, just to protect our liability side.
And just so the board knows, PSEO is an acronym that stands for Post-Secondary Enrollment Option. And so it's a program that allows kids while they're here on campus to take DMAC courses. In fact, some even walk away with a 2-year degree while they're here. It's a great program, great thing for kids. Education, we love acronyms, and we use them like we assume everybody knows exactly what they mean. And so PSEO has been around for a long time. It's Post-Secondary Enrollment Option.
On financial dashboard, if you look at that, you'll see some, our open enrollment comes in, it skews the numbers a little bit on the monthly. You'll also see some skewed numbers, you'll see some large percentages based on what we receive for ESSER. And that's I don't even know what it stands for. So it's the government program, the COVID program. So, what we spend is reimbursed for that directly, dollar for dollar. So you'll see that coming in also in this month. So that skews the receipts and disbursements just a little bit, but other than that, they're in line with what we should be at this point in time. Also, and I switched this over, I put it in the folder so you should be able to see it if you click on the bills and financial reports. This is the proposal for the budget that we'll actually approve at the April meeting. you look at the budgeted 2023 number, you'll see that our proposed property tax rate went down almost $3.50. Even though that's a good thing, that's the problem with that is we are so cash heavy right now. Our cash balance is sufficient to cover the demands that we no longer are able to tax back for, like special ed deficit or anything above that on the SBRC. So we have the money in place to back that stuff already, so we're not allowed to tax for it anymore. Also, as our management fund balance had, and our auditors shared this with us too, is more than sufficient to handle early retirement and insurance payments out of there. So we've decreased that from our normal amount down to 100,000 just to cover the monthly, or the yearly insurance out of that. And that will take that down. And that's what the difference in the two SBRC cash taxing and the management fund decrease is where we got the almost $3.50 decrease in that. So it's a good thing for taxpayers when we come in the times we're at right now where everything's escalating. The property tax will actually go down. Just remember that once I publish this, we can only lower this amount. We can't raise it. So this is what they'll see. And if you see something published higher than that, don't be alarmed because we'll bring it back down if we do. I play around with some numbers as far as different rates on our instructional support levy, but I think this is the way we want to go. We want to stay consistent, and if we take a reduction, we take a reduction. That's not a bad thing. So just so you know. And you do have, like I said, I did share a copy with that in your financial folder.
So as a board member, I would tell you, when you look at this, that really this isn't the level of, I wouldn't be concerned if you don't understand every single aspect of this. I don't know that that's necessarily your role to. I think the highlights for are the important ones that people know, if they ask why their tax rate going down, it's because we've hit some of those levers and mechanisms that are built into the formula where we've capped out. So we mentioned management, we mentioned the cash reserve levy, the instructional support levy. Those are just areas where we're throttled up or down sometimes based on what the formula tells us. And right now the formula tells us that we're at our point. So, inevitably we're going to back down the rates, and that's not a bad thing.
Very good. Thanks for that explanation, Tony.
And Robert.
And Robert. Yes.
Sorry.
The added explanation.
I don't always explain that well enough.
I guess just reassuring that we don't have to understand every single piece of it, really.
You're surely
Right,
welcome
intended.
to.
Yeah.
We will meet with you anytime, go through all the details of
Yeah.
this. It used to be an actual spreadsheet that Robert would get. Many, many years ago when I went to graduate school, you could manipulate a lot of those cell boxes in there. I think there's only 3 now that you can actually adjust.
But
So,
yeah, now it's all online. It's not even a spreadsheet anymore.
so it's improved a lot, the process. The troubling thing, I think, as a board member is that the number of moves we have budget-wise are so limited. It used to be you had a lot of authority over important decisions, and really now the Iowa finance formula drives most of them.
There's only about a dozen boxes on the aid levy input anymore that we're allowed to even control. Everything else is, you can almost pull it up anymore and runs itself.
So this isn't an action item, it's just kind of an FYI. Robert puts this in, it's always interesting to me. You've got to put in your board meeting in April, and then it spits back at a very specific time that Robert's got to get the information filed with Steve so that we can post it in the paper. And X amount of days ahead of time, but not too many days ahead of time, and so it's all spelled out. We'll be compliant, that way we can have our hearing for the budget at the April meeting, and we'll be ready to do that. The one thing Robert said I would reiterate, once it's published, we can throttle it down all we want. We cannot throttle it up, no matter what.
Any other discussion on minutes, bills, and financial reports? If not, I need a motion to approve the minutes, bills, and financial reports.
I move we approve the minutes based on financial reports.
Thank you, Carol. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion passes.
We have to
So,
Oh, roll
All
call.
those in favor?
Oh, no, all those in favor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. How's that?
There we go.
All right, there we go. You might have to remind me 15 more times, but
We got it.
next on our agenda is communication from the public. Anybody have anything to share? Anybody online? I think it's just in
It's one way.
visual, or I mean, listening only. So we'll move on to informational only. Tony?
Yeah, I wanted to throw a shout out. I promise it's not because she's in the room, but I thought it was super cool that Mrs. Busick's class wrote a tree grant. They secured a tree grant, and I think that I was envisioning like 20 or so trees to be planted kind of around the property, in lieu of the giant tree that was protested.
So sad.
Certain children were very vocal at
Passionate.
home and at school.
Passionate.
And so it was neat to see them secure this grant. I think we ended up securing either 100 or 200 trees. So not all of those will be able to go on campus. Doug Phil would kill me if they did. So what I would say is that I've reached out to the city and the city of Pleasantville, really as long as it goes anywhere in the city limits, it's fine. And so you think about the trees that were planted up along the walking paths and a few other places. So between the school and the city, we'll find plenty of places for these. They're beautiful trees, or the little ones. That,
I was gonna say, they're those little
yeah,
ones.
I think they're the 24 inches or so, but
That's awesome.
it was neat to see. Even my daughter was part of it, the group that wrote it, and the day they found out they got it, they were this excited. So awesome. Well done.
That is
Good
experience.
Project
Yeah.
you just did with your class? How did that?
It came about because this huge tree was right outside our window, and when the track project started, it
Yeah.
was realized that that tree wasn't gonna be part of the project.
Oh, gotcha.
And so it was kind of devastating, and there was a big protest, and they had to
They need
learn. It was a
signs.
teachable moment that they had to learn that even sometimes when you really want something really bad, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. And so anyway, I told them we will plant another tree. And it turned out to be a lot of trees, but that's okay. They're excited about doing it. I just hope that there's plenty of place like that you can see from my classroom that's ready to plant trees by the end of the school year so that we can do it. So.
Good job. Yes, that's very cool.
Yeah,
It will
the day
take some
when
time for those
went
trees
down.
to achieve
they-
the size of the tree you destroyed.
I don't think you was-
But I think it'll be exciting to note.
And many, many tears.
At the same time, they were speaking in
Many
tears.
They were very
Yes.
upset about it.
So
It was a beautiful trip.
that was fun. Seems like every month we're talking about FFA, and this month will be no different. Probably too many kids to just go through line by line, but as you can see, just a lot of kids recognized for outstanding performances at recent events. And as I've alluded to last month, perhaps with the speech kids, these are events that I see serving kids well in life, well beyond high school. When I think about our profile of our graduate work, a lot of these things, parliamentary procedure, creed speaking, these are skills that will serve these kids really well in life. So very proud of them, very proud of our new advisor. Just
Yeah,
done
that's
a
what I was-
wonderful job.
My comment was, it's so exciting to see the level of the job they're doing with the first year teacher.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
kudos to him.
and we knew coming in, there were some areas where Mr. Johnner was nervous about, out in the shop, and some things that he didn't have quite Monty's wisdom with. But then there were some areas too that we knew Chandler would shine, and this is one of his leadership skill development events.
Very impressive.
Are areas where he was, as a student, very polished, and I think that you're seeing some of that with regard to our student performance. Speech had a wonderful district competition up in Marshalltown. 11 of the 15 events got Division I ratings in advance. Just a bunch of great kids there listed. Happy for them and the staff who work with them. Just a really cool thing. And a couple of kids advanced in 2 events, which is incredible for freshmen, as I alluded to in the news and notes. So well done, speechers. And then, of course, good luck at the district competition here on the 12th. Or excuse me, not here, but in Grinnell on the 12th.
moving on. You had one more, so I was waiting on you, but we will turn it over to Ryan Nelson for the stadium construction update.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited to get back out here with the spring. So essentially, you guys can flip a few pages to the progress summary on page 3. I think the big thing you probably want to see is what's next. So we're gonna get back out here. Joiner is gonna work on the subgrade prep. We're gonna have Woodruff construction on site starting next week. Start working on some concrete foundations. Inside the football field, we're gonna put in drainage tiles. That will be Joiner. And then the track trench drain will be going around the north end of the field there. That'd be a Woodruff activity. So really, in the next couple of weeks, you're gonna see Woodruff, Joiner, and Ardent lighting on site for the most part. These progress photos here, we're gonna kind of skip these. These are, you guys can look at, read them and see the dates, but essentially those are the same ones as the last update. If you flip to the schedule update page, you can kind of see this is our 3-week look ahead schedule down here at the bottom. So like today and the rest of this week, we had Ardent lighting on site, working on setting the light poles. We're gonna have Joiner on site next week, and same with Woodruff. So yeah, excited to get back out here and get going. Hopefully this Iowa weather quits snowing on us and we can get some work done here.
It was interesting to me today at our construction meeting to note our site superintendent talking about how this last snow and the one we're proposed, or they're forecasting for Thursday, actually is gonna help the project because it's really light fluffy snow. It's gonna go down into the soil fast and it's gonna cut the frost faster. I would have thought this was a giant hindrance, but Annie really seemed to think it should be helpful.
And that's what, so Joiners, getting the frost out of the ground for them is a big deal for that subgrade prep.
Do you know how deep the frost is?
I didn't hear, but
I heard
I wanna
they're
say
not very deep this year.
I mean, that's what I would have thought, but.
6 to 8 inches is what they said.
What they're saying,
Yeah.
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So not much.
if you guys flip the page to budget and cost control, I'll go over this real quick. So, I guess not much has changed since the last meetings. One thing that we have is we have one change order on the irrigation system. So that the irrigation system used to be on the north side of the field, and it just didn't make sense to keep it where it was located. So that irrigation system it's going to be out of the concession building now. It's going to be way more
Utilities
convenient.
building.
Yeah.
The utilities closet within that building.
Yes, yep. So that's the one change order. That's that 8,361 that you see with the change in the contingency amount. And that's, Tony, do you want hard copies of these or?
Yeah, because they'll need signatures.
Here, I'll just give them to you now. And you can, if you can sign them and scan them or whatever works, but, to give a little update on so contingencies to date, we've had 98,015 in total changes. But one thing to keep in mind is we've had 187,368 in credits that we get back. So net total, we're still about negative 90,000 in what we've given back to the project. So we kind of have to look at those together. It's just that we agreed that the 187,000 credit would go directly back to the district, whereas the construction contingency is a separate, basically like Tony and I talked, it's like a bucket of money that's reserved for the project for change orders. I'll kind of explain that more on the next page. Because then we also have allowances, and on the allowances, those are essentially already distributed with each bid package. So each bid package carries its own allowance. And then at the end of the project, if we have funds that are remaining in those allowances, they go back to the district at the very end of the project. So like right now, on the allowances, it started at 120, and right now we're at 95,485 remaining. So we have about, so in the budget right now, we got, let's see, 49,000 left in the construction contingency, and then we have 95,000 left in the allowances. So.
And real quickly, I see our previous contingency was almost 58,000, so from the last time we discussed to
That-
today,
Exactly.
we, roughly $11,000
Yep, so,
lower. And then where were we at the very start, just to kind of put that into perspective?
yeah, here, if you flip the page here, this page I think is a little easier to look at. Well,
That's easy for you to
Maybe,
say.
yeah, you might need to zoom in here too. But,
Bifocals, we
so if you guys look at like this section that says construction with number 40, those are all the bid packages with all the trades. So their contract values are what already have the allowances built into them. So if we pull something from an allowance, you're not necessarily gonna see those dollar values change until the very end of the project. If we have money to get back, then those contract amounts will change at that time. So those, as of right now, the only allowance change we've had is joiner. And school districts do it differently. Like if, to be transparent, we've been, any change, even if it's an allowance, we've been bringing to these board meetings. Some school districts will say, okay, the superintendent has, they can make changes up to X dollar amount by allowances, and you don't need to bring them to a board meeting. So that could be.
My preference is just to have you aware of all of them.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if the difference you explained makes sense, but, both are contingency pots of money, and I just think it's good for you to have a sense of what is coming out of them either way.
Yep. And then to kind of, this should make it make more sense. So down at the very bottom, you can see number 60 is construction contingency. So we started at 147,519. So basically, that's just essentially a bucket of money that you guys are aware of that's reserved for change orders and unforeseens that come up. And then, so as these change orders get approved, like for example, this one for the irrigation system, that budget is being reduced by that change order. And then those dollar amounts are going up here to the bid packages. That specific change order had 3 contractors that were involved. So there's 3 separate sheets because the school district carries a separate contract with each prime contractor.
You don't have copies of the prime contracts, that's what I just gave Michelle.
So if all of the change orders and things have come out of the
They've come up,
contingencies,
Yep.
then we haven't done anything with this credit amount. That's the amount we started with, and that's still all there, or did something come out
Well,
there too?
no, so basically the credit amount, it didn't go back to the contingencies. The credit amount just went back to the district. So,
Oh, so we got
Yeah.
that. We already have that.
yeah,
Okay, so that's why nothing's coming out there. Got it.
yeah.
Okay,
So it's
sorry.
just a matter of like, we're, keeping track of, essentially the contingency is the district's. And so is, it's just a
Right,
matter
it's
of how
just
you
paying
manage
for the change.
where it comes from.
Got it.
And typically like that, the contingency, for example, is typically left for some things like, unforeseen things like that. And then as we get closer to the end of the project, if there's like more owner enhancement related items, then it typically becomes more open for those types of things. We had some changes, like the sidewalk change is a good one. That's kind of like an owner enhancement, big item. But we felt that as long as we're open and transparent with you guys, we figured we might as well go ahead and, we have the construction contingency there. We might as well go ahead and take it from that. And then the big credit that we had for 187, we might as well go ahead and give that all back right now. But we just said, let's track. That's why on this page, we're just gonna keep showing where we're at total between all those buckets of money, so.
Got it.
And Robert,
Thank you.
I can meet with you too at any time if we want to get more involved with this sheet. Because there's some additional expenses items that, I can fill out and add to this.
Okay.
So. Yeah, that's pretty much the update that I have today, so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
And do we have any additional communication from the public with regards to the?
I don't know why I keep having this on there twice.
Okay, I didn't know if I was
I use
supposed to
the
say
same
that
template
after.
every month. And
I thought, well, maybe I need to offer that after stadium track
No,
talk, so, okay, so that's the type. Move on.
She didn't say that.
Just so everybody knows, Mark is joining the meeting via my phone, so try to speak loud enough for you to hear me on this.
Right, sounds good. Moving on to the consent agenda. The board will act upon these items below in one action.
Yep.
And-
as a reminder, if the board wants to take anything off, you certainly have that right. Typically, we don't, but if there's any questions about anything as I go through it, just let me know, and we can flag it and move it down to as number 8 on the action items if we need to. Pretty typical consent agenda. We have under personnel, we do have a couple of resignations. Grant Fauch has resigned as a junior high baseball coach, and then it was just really painful for me to watch Dylan Daniel resign. Great young teacher, great young coach, moving with his spouse and young family up to rural northeast Iowa, where she grew up. So I tried to tell him everything I knew about the area and explain that there's not much
Nothing?
there,
Nothing?
particularly for somebody that doesn't deer hunt. But the decision's been made. So
Drive an hour and a half to get to the mall, 45 minutes.
it's closer to
get
2
a
hours.
mall.
But yeah, I hate to see him go, but certainly wish him and his family well. In terms of new hires, we've got 3 people listed here, all are coaching related. We've got a couple of well-known, 3 very well-known people to our community. Becky Jolly is a volunteer coach, Eric Isley is a volunteer coach, and then Tyler Bethke, Mr. Allman interviewed to be the assistant high school girls track coach. And we have an internal transfer. Erin McBroom is currently our junior high science teacher. She's gonna put in a request, and one that I would recommend be approved to move to the high school, teach science in the position that's been vacated by Mr. Jordan. So he's moving to, a couple of months ago, the board approved his transfer to be a counselor next year. And so Aaron's gonna move into that position vacated by Coach Jordan.
So now we only need one son.
We'll
Still
need
need
junior high
2?
science, and then we'll need Mr. Daniel's position after tonight.
Oh, damn it, okay. Darn it. That'll do.
And then I'll move on to open enrollments, because this is all part of the consent agenda. 3 out, the 3 out are a little bit more unusual circumstances. You've got a couple who requested to go to the Online Connections Academy, just because of various reasons that I think we into at the board table with their health related. I'll just scan them and
Okay, perfect, thanks guys.
and then the last one is a request to transfer into Knoxville's Homeschool Assistance Program. And so we don't get a lot of those. As I understand it, we do get a little bit of the open enrollment money, so it is worth our time to approve the request. We do get a tiny bit of that chunk of money, but Knoxville set up a homeschool assistance program, and so this family is moving into our community and wants to take advantage of it. I would suggest we approve it. And then we have a handful in, so I won't go through them line by line, case by case, but various reasons, and some of them are building homes here, and some of them are moving here, and some of them are already in our system, and it's always good to see more in than out.
And these are for next year, correct?
Just double checking. Yes, I believe these are all 22, 23. A couple of them are already in our system.
Right.
They want to make sure they're compliant for next year.
All right, very good. Any further comments or questions? If not, I need a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Ron. Do we have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Mark. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. Moving on to new business.
Yeah, the 3 change orders, item number 1 here for the, it's the 3 that Ryan mentioned. It's all for the irrigation system. It's a 6,000 something. One's to Ardent for the irrigation pump, one's to the Brooker Corp for water service, and one's to Joiner for 2,300 and some change of additional digging and work.
Does that line up with
That's
our
not
figures?
6,000.
I know, I was a little bit confused on that. And sorry, Ryan already left the room, but,
That's not 6,000.
Well, whatever the amounts listed there, sorry, I don't know where I got the
8361
6,000.
maybe?
No, the amounts that I said are the right ones. So Ardent is 652, Brooker would be 950, and then Joiner is 2,360.
Which would be what I have over here.
I'm way off base.
So what's the 8,361? Just questioning.
It was in his report.
Yeah.
Pending
I would
changes.
guess we have a submittal that didn't make the board bills.
Okay.
Okay.
I just didn't say it's not.
We'll make sure that when we, if we,
My math sense.
So to be clear, you're approving what is in Michelle's hand.
What is
not-
Michelle's hand? Yes,
not the other.
okay, perfect. I move that we approve the stadium project change orders.
okay, thank you, Carol. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving
Jody,
on,
on a side note, is Michelle able to sign those tonight, or do I need to sign them tomorrow when I get back?
No, I think she can sign them, Mark.
All right, sounds good.
it's a good thing I brought my stamp with me. Just kidding. All right, moving on to
Probably
consider,
that
no worries. Consider additional staffing due to growth.
Yeah, and we may actually, I got a message here from Mr. Allman just a few minutes before the board meeting started. What I would suggest is that we go ahead and approve this if it's necessary. And if it's not, we won't have it. Joel wasn't 100% sure that we were going to need the position now. But what I would say is we've generally used a spreadsheet that he's presented in the past where it's numbers based, and when we get to a certain threshold of participants to coaches, that's then the trigger to add additional staffing. And so what I would say is if the numbers are there, once we get going, we'll have the authority to add the position. If the numbers aren't there, we won't need to add it.
Has there been a pretty big influx in track athletes this year in comparison to last year?
Yeah, I mean, I know that he's expecting, I don't know if you have any sense for it. I do not, I can't tell you specifics.
I think there's
But I know that-
37 in the girls.
I know that they were braced for more kids than last year. And it seems like the last couple of years in a row have always been the most kids we've had out in a long time.
Get the right people in the right positions to get people excited about it.
So you have a couple options here. If you're not comfortable approving it based on kind of what I described, we could table it. Otherwise, we could approve it tentatively, and if the numbers are there, we'll add it, and if the numbers aren't there, we won't. You would still approve the hire at some point.
Right. I'm comfortable with tabling it and addressing it when we have a little more information, if that's,
I think that would be appropriate.
I feel, given my position this evening, that makes me most comfortable. All right, so we don't need to vote on tabling it, do we, or do we? Okay, I need a motion to consider tabling the junior high assistant track coach approval.
Would make a motion that we table the discussion of and vote on the junior high track position pending more information about the number of participants.
Thank you, Ron. Do we have a second? Thanks, Shane. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 3, consider additional section of second grade for the 22-23 school year due to growth.
Yeah, so you should have a sheet in front of you, something like this. And I know that there's a lot of moving parts there, but I guess what this outlines is just kind of tentative class size targets. And what it shows you is a breakdown of elementary, junior high, and high school. We currently serve 776 kids for this school year, and you can see kind of how that breaks down. The reason for this recommendation, and Tom can chime in more if necessary, but when you look at the current first grade group, it's a group of 53 kids. It's been broken down into 3 sections. That's a challenging group of kids. And academically, they're kids that honestly coming out of the pandemic have had some hits to their education along the way and their opportunities. So when that group goes into second grade next year, the thought of having 26 or 27 kids in a class is over that threshold where my comfortability lies. So it's always a tough proposition when you add sectioning in a district like this where, some years our enrollment's up and other years it dips slightly. I do worry a little bit when you look at the high school numbers. You see 60 in 12th grade, 62 in 10th grade, 61 in 8th grade. And then you look at the lower elementary, you see probably closer to mid-50s. I just think the important thing is that everybody understands, the board, the administration, and particularly the staff, that, just because we have 3 sections at one point in time doesn't mean we always get 3 sections of something. If enrollment goes up, this is generally what we'll use to kind of target and determine capacity. And so, given the circumstances, given the challenging nature of that group, I'm behind Tom's recommendation of a 3rd section, even though I do have a little bit of concern what it does 2 and 3 and 4 years out on our unspent balance. I'm okay with the recommendation. We're still in the sweet spot to get a good staff member and a good colleague to join the team. And then I worked at Iowa State Recruitment Fair yesterday and got some leads. A couple I'm very encouraged by. So, I don't worry about our ability to recruit for this position right now. So this still buys us time if we add the position tonight to go out and get somebody great to join our team.
What's the ideal ratio for students to teachers? I mean, where we?
There's
where would we
no
like to see it?
research around anything. I would tell you lower class size to me is a common sense method to make teachers and staff be able to have more connections, more attention, more support. I get that there's no formal research around it, but I don't care. I hate to sound crass, but I think that it's common sense that a more reasonable ratio of kids to staff is a way that we can impact kids' outcomes. We can impact teacher recruitment, retention. And so, it's the right question to be asking. There's no great answer. I'm more comfortable, as you can see here, the kind of the breakdown. 6th grade, for instance, it says a range of 18 to 30. Would I be comfortable with that preschool? Probably not. Right. Certainly when you look at the upper grade levels, can you put more kids in a room this size with one teacher? Probably. But after a certain number, in fact, I made a mistake once when I was a teacher telling my principal, after you give me 25, you might as well give me 50. Because it's going to change the way I do things so much. And I was a high school teacher, so I wasn't chasing littles around. But, after a certain number, it makes it hard to strategically design ways to engage kids. And so it's all those reasons combined is kind of why I shared this. And it gives you some sense of where that range is. I think there's a sweet spot there in terms of efficiency, but also effectiveness. And so we generally shoot for that ratio based on grade level of the kids, if that makes sense.
I would add sometimes it depends on what the class is like too.
Sure.
Our current sophomore class, when they were there, Mick had 29 and Vicky Carter had 30. We had 59 kids in 2 sections. They were a really good group and pretty easy to manage. This group happens to be my lowest academic performing, and my 49% of my referrals come from this grade alone. So they're my biggest behavioral challenge. So to put them into 2 sections to me just looks like a recipe for disaster. So.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. I was just
Yeah.
curious from you guys' standpoint, that ideal ratio.
Yeah, I think it depends on the kids in that batch sometimes too.
Yeah,
Sometimes
sure.
59 in 2 sections will be just fine. And sometimes 49 in 2 sections is too many. So it just depends sometimes with what the clientele.
Yeah.
And the pandemic definitely did, I think, had an impact on this, on some of our lower elementary groups.
Sure.
How interesting, 2 years into this and
Yep.
what you're seeing at those levels. So.
Mark, I don't know if I heard you start to comment. Were you wanting to chime in on something?
Yeah, sorry about that. I count add to a school our size does to the pool of money. This is the advantage of huge schools that can have perfect class size and perfect utilization of staff and staff salaries, and just the challenge of a growing and shrinking kind of elementary at times and trying to do that. But it was pretty shocking to me that you take even a brand new teacher and all of the other compensation part of that, those dollars add up pretty quick. So we have to be cautious about these ads, and thoughtful. But certainly I support this based on what I've heard and what I hear tonight.
And one quick question, of the 70 students in kindergarten currently, which I see is 3 sections, including TK, will they all move? They'll all move to first? Or
That's
will
4, it's 70 kids in 4 sections because that includes TK.
includes?
There's
Okay.
16, I think, in TK right now. So there's 54 kids in kindergarten. So they would be going into 3 sections of first grade.
But the TK will stay in kindergarten.
Kindergarten.
Yeah.
Kindergarten from there.
And right now, the
They don't-
preschool numbers,
Right.
right now the preschool numbers are 51 and a half because we have a 3-year-old that's there halftime. But that will, basically we're looking at 16 kids going into TK as well. So we're right around 50 kids or whatever, or 52 kids, somewhere in that neighborhood. And kindergarten tends to be the group that we get the most new bodies showing up. It's usually about 5 new kids a year. That's fairly normal. Like, we don't know they're going to be there, but they'll be there.
Right.
They almost always are at minimum 3 and sometimes 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think we'll be above 50 in kindergarten, first and second, and maybe preschool again. You never know.
Heading in the direction we'd like to see it, I suppose.
Yes.
Increased enrollment, so. Anybody else have any questions or comments regarding the additional section of second grade for the 22-23 school year due to growth? If not, I need a motion to approve.
I'll move that we add an additional teacher for the additional section for the second grade for the 22-23 school year.
Thank you, Carol. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you,
Boy, that was
Ron.
unison.
Oh.
I heard Ron right here next to me. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Consider staff retention program.
Yes, so, process-wise, I would just remind the board that I met with staff on Friday of last week. I just went through a very brief slide deck, which you'll have a copy of when I send out my official summary to you tomorrow. But the reason why we got there, and I know that printed really wonky, sorry, but really it's not something we've spent a lot of time talking about. It's just for the artifacts to show you. But the state developed rules and regs around this teacher retention bonus idea, and the design of that by the Department of Ed only included full-time classroom teachers. It's a nice gesture, but it was poorly designed in my opinion. So we've had discussions, in fact, connected individually with all 5 of you, as well as included some information in my board update last week. But I'm a big believer that if we're going to do anything, we ought to try to do something for everybody. And so, Pleasantville schools, just based on the staff that are included in what I will call the state group, included full-time teachers only. And so that excluded your part-time teachers, your instructional coaches, your counselors, your school nurse, all of your support staff, so your associates, your bus drivers, your custodians, your cooks, your secretaries. It included no administration and certified staff members, and it didn't include any district department heads or department leaders. So in terms of state funding for the state plan, we should get $60,284 if I did the math right. Robert did the math right, I should say. The proposal that I'm still in favor of, and I would still recommend we consider tonight, is offering that same type of commitment to all staff. Any full-time staff members would receive the full bonus. Any part-time staff members would receive a prorated bonus. Anybody who joined the district mid-year would receive a prorated amount that Robert's calculated out. If our math all checks out and everybody was included, it will be a dip into our ESSER funds, which is the Elementary and Secondary Schools Education Relief. That's the acronym for ESSER, in case you're interested. And really, when you see the laundry list of things that ESSER can be used for, one of the things is encouraged is retention and recruitment. And so there's a certain percentage of our ESSER dollars that are earmarked specifically for what's called learning loss. We haven't made that determination what that will be specifically. We've got some flexibility there, but about $123,067 of our ESSER funds will need to remain held back and designated for learning loss. I can see a lot of different ways we leverage that. One of the ideas maybe is recruitment and retention of another section of second grade. I don't know. We can get creative. But we'll have some ways to get creative and spend that down appropriately. We have a balance, a very healthy balance in ESSER, and so all those staff groups that were not included in the state plan, I just designated as the local plan that I'm proposing, would receive the same bonus that the full-time teachers would receive. That would be $65,312.53.
Thank you. Couldn't see that. I thought that's what it was.
To provide that bonus to all other staff that draw a paycheck from the school district. There are some school districts across the state that have made this decision at their board meeting last night. Generally speaking, you get a lot of positive vibes, positive morale boosts, call it what you want. But I still think that's the right thing to do for people. There's a lot of people that helped keep the school doors open. There's a lot of people that were involved in our back to school and return to learn plans. And I'm a believer that helping some of these staff positions that are becoming harder and harder and harder to find people in the competitive market for, this is a nice way to reward them in an appropriate use of our ESSER dollars.
What's the longevity of that retention program?
So think of it in past tense. It's longevity for staying with us through the pandemic, not a longevity bonus for next year. If we were going to design it that way, I would have broken it down and had, a May payment of 2023 and a December payment of 2022. The state plan requires that all teachers get this money by April 5th. And so I think we align with that for our local plan and try to do this either in the March or the April payroll.
So this is just a one-time?
One time.
Okay.
Well, it was very exciting to see the teacher retention plan, and then when you brought it up to us that wanting to include all staff, lots of those folks like yourself stuck out in my mind during the middle of our pandemic as we were trying to figure out how we were going to get through it, and the summer meal program and just all the extra hours and time that our custodians put in, extra cleaning, and so it only made sense. It really seemed unfair. So I'm hugely in favor, and I appreciate you coming up with that yourself. And do we have a motion? Or I guess any further comments first and foremost regarding consider staff retention program?
Yeah, I would just say, we didn't talk to somebody, but Michelle, I think you're right in thanking Tony for bringing, this is something that kind of could have went by without the opportunity brought to us to support all of our great employees. And yes, I'm happy that the state is recognizing our full-time staff, but I'm glad if this goes through and is supported, I'm glad we're able to do it for all. And I totally appreciate you bringing it in a way that was digestible.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we need a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the staff retention program as presented.
Thank you, Ron. Do we have a second? Thanks, Shane. Motion passes. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion now passes. All right, moving on to consider track equipment bids.
This is something that hasn't happened in this district in a heck of a long time. We knew going into the stadium project that there would be some expense with regard to equipment that the district hasn't bought in many, many years. It was kind of cool tearing into the shed down here and finding like the old high jump poles and the old equipment and some of that stuff that was a little vintage, but props to Mr. Allman. He did a great job, and you will have a link to all this if you're interested. But he did do a nice job of going out to multiple vendors and put together a spreadsheet that you can look at there on the track equipment. Got multiple bids and really kind of hard to get apples to apples bids. As you can see, like some of the companies would bid high jump packages but wouldn't bid hurdles. Some would bid, so I think he did a really nice job of piecing together a plan here. He really wants to go with Gill, which he feels like is the top of the line stuff on the high jump package, hurdles, long jump package, cones, tarps and covers, an official starting stand. And then you see a smaller, so that would be about a $37,000 purchase. And then about a $2,170 purchase from Danco for starting blocks, a cart to move them around, flags and cones. So should set us up to host track meets. The only other expense I could tell the board might be coming down the road would be the potential for a track timing system, which will be set up to use at our new stadium, but that will be something coming down the road. So this should really set us up, minus that track timing system, to host events and have top-notch equipment to go along with our top-notch facility for kids and staff.
Very good. It looks like Joel went out and obtained 6 different bids before narrowing it down to the 2 final. So, like you said, Tony, it looks like he really did his homework, and I think I read somewhere that he even negotiated a little bit to try to get those prices down. And
I think he learned a valuable lesson, because I told him that he could tell I asked him to tell all 6 of those companies that he was going to take a recommendation to the board and that the low offer would be the winner. And he was like, they all dropped their bids by like thousands of dollars.
We don't play the game.
You were the business teacher.
I'm the worst at buying cars, by the way. Like 0 negotiating skills.
I wouldn't say that.
I want it.
I would make a motion that we approve the track equipment bids.
All right, thank you, Ron. Do we have a second?
Also,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to consider board policy updates.
This is Russell's. You should have in front of you Linda's legendary 1-page summary. Take weeks and weeks and weeks of work, cram it into 2 pages somehow. But we've got the updates there for the 7 and 800 series. And so Linda will walk us through. So this is our first reading. Walk us through the whole thing top to bottom.
So you'll see that in the 7, we'll start with the 700s. All the 700s, there was a big change to this section. I think things have changed over the past number of years, and we just haven't had a lot. We haven't caught a lot of those. So there's a lot of new policies. I think there used to be kind of a catch-all policy or 2. Now there's just a lot of separate policies. So even though a lot of those policies are new in ours, a lot of them were stated elsewhere, just encompassing in one policy. But so all the different types of policies that you see there are listed. You have that access to the folder to read each of them individually. We've run through all of these new policies with Robert, so he's very comfortable with those as well. Took some time and read through those. Really not riveting changes necessarily, but they're all good policies, and as things change with school districts and everything, of course, we want to make sure that you have those procedures in place, so as things come up, we know how to handle those. Some of the modifications down below, and I listed some of the modifications that some of them have more material changes than others, like the first one is the statement of guiding principles. It's kind of the overall policy for the 700s. There's a title change, and it names some various services, but really not a lot of material changes. The transfer of funds, it did talk about, transferring leadership funds and how we can request approval from the committee to transfer, and the loans could be permitted within different funds. So we have those options now. financial records, there's different types of funds, like the agency funds are removed from the list of fiduciary funds. So there's a long list of what types of funds and what they fall under. So those things changed a little bit, not a lot. And then the addition that the district can establish other funds as needed, depending on what that is, of course, if it's not covered in another area. And then the local, state, federal miscellaneous revenue, the big change there is that the board can elect to deposit proceeds from real estate into any fund and then include that information on public hearings. And some of that, to me, can be covered and will follow all school board laws as assigned. So that's one of those things that they threw in. And of course, we follow all the regulations as stated. Investments, there's addition of the public funds. If they exceed a certain amount, we can purchase a CD that has a fairly short expiration date. So that was a new piece to that. Payroll deductions, we're going to do that as required by law. The secretary's report and the treasurer's annual report, that was previously one policy. It didn't really change, but it's now one policy. Audits, just talked about the change there was how we select an auditor. We're going to use the RFP process for that. The care, maintenance, and disposal of district records. We took a little extra time with this. That's pretty important. So we wanted to make sure all the people who might have some control over student records, business records, staff records, all those things, took a look at this. Even Shelley with food service, there's certain things that are required there. So we had everybody take some time to look through those and make sure that we were doing those things appropriately. And so, the school nutrition program, really more of a language change. It used to be breakfast, lunch, and meals, and now everything's called nutrition. And then talked about regulation requiring how we procure some of the supplies we get. Free and reduced lunch, that really talks more about how we're notifying families. And then school bus safety, we're doing drills twice a year instead of once. You'll see some of those policies removed that were in our policies before. Some of those are separate. They're included in other policies, so they're no longer standalone policy. But if you took some time to look through those, any questions about any of the 700s at all?
So I would tell you with regard to these policies, it's very similar to the budget discussion we talked about earlier with the tax rate form. Generally speaking, I think what you as board members need to be assured of is that these policies have been vetted, cross-referenced, and all are compliant with legal code. It's our responsibility in the business office to make sure that when these policies are adhered to and that our staff understands the ones that are relevant. So for instance, 7046, the crowdfunding one, that was one that we had a really interesting discussion about, because that wouldn't have been a thing the last time policies were reviewed. And so districts have actually had to have policies around some of these areas that didn't exist in the past, where you got teachers pay teachers, or not teachers pay teachers, but
Donors choose.
donors choose, thank you,
Yes.
that's what I was trying to think of. We need to have a policy there, because what some schools got into early with that is unwittingly or unknowingly committing to certain grants that were district contribution match. And then when they get the award, there was an expectation for the district to give them money that may or may not have been approved by the board. So that's just one example, but really your level of scrutiny and engagement with this doesn't, if you don't understand what all these things mean, we sure can go through them, and you can ask any questions you want, and I will explain them to your level of satisfaction. But I guess what I would stress to you is that these are vetted, through a legal service that we use through IASB, and have been personalized. They're not just a template that we've cut and pasted. Linda and on this set of series, Robert and I have helped to go through and make sure it aligns with how our district operates.
Thank you.
We move on to the 800s. And this section is on buildings and facilities. So you'll see some of those new policies at capital assets. Of course, had Robert make sure he took a good look at that. Some of the other new policies that were there, again, kind of the same thing, there's just some new things that have come along that we wanted to make sure that we had in there, and these are the Iowa Association of School Board policies as they recommend them. And we did, again, as the 700s went through and made sure that they made sense for us. Modifications of some of the policies, the objectives of the building and site, again, this is one of that overall policy statement. For this section, there is title change, and the language kind of throughout these policies really focuses on supporting learning and education. So how, if we're doing something with the building, does it support the learning and education? Is it good for kids? And then just overseeing daily operations and making sure the board is apprised of any improvements and needs that we need to do. Site acquisition, it removed having that master site acquisition plan. That's no longer required. And then site specification will, of course, meet the needs of the education plan. So you'll kind of see that repeated throughout those policies as well. Maintenance schedule. There was a note in there about graffiti does or can cause liability for the district. So it was required that we include that graffiti language in our policy so we don't create a situation that we don't expect with liability and how some of that language might be offensive to some. So that was kind of interesting for me. The request for improvements, that was a title change that used to be request for improvement and emergency repairs, and now those are two separate policies. Really there wasn't a lot of change necessarily, just that they split those up to be different policies. Building and site adaptation for person with disabilities, really the change there was replace the word handicapped with disabled. So again, the language changed, but not a lot of material changes there. And the disposition of obsolete equipment, how we handle those things, the value of the equipment that's required to go through that particular process, changed from $5,000 to $25,000. So we have a little bit more leeway. There's a school volunteer policy in this section. We just moved that to the 400 series. Didn't change it, kept it the same, but put it in its proper place. And then a couple policies that were removed, the sale of bonds, and then the receiving goods and services. Those policies were no longer in IASB policy. Any questions about that?
Anybody have any questions? Mark?
Sorry, getting off mute. No, I can hear Linda fine, so it all makes sense to me.
If no one has any further questions, we need a motion to approve the first reading of board series, policy series 700 and series 800.
Michelle, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
Why would you guys need to keep the graduates' records forever? That just kind of makes me confused.
We get often, Steve, requests from graduates for a transcript who have lost theirs. And so really the only thing we keep along that line long-term is the transcript.
And, why would the district be liable for, like if someone is offended by graffiti, why would the district be liable if, we both oppose the graffiti and nobody employed by the district put it there? That makes no sense.
I think if you leave a graffiti that's offensive and you don't do anything about it, then you're contributing to the detriment of the community. Right. Yeah.
If I put up a swastika and they don't take it down,
Yeah.
it could be applied as an endorsement or whatever.
So if somebody said, usually it was, that if you left it up, then people would say the school is more racist.
I don't see why anybody would leave that out.
Exactly. Which is why it's in the policy.
Never
That's why you have to have a big one.
Exactly.
I'm crossing T's out.
Policy.
Don't just throw those two.
That's right.
And Lord,
I think those were great questions. Steve, do you have any other questions?
No, not right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We have a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the first reading of board policy series 700 and 800.
I'll second. Okay. And all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to number 7 under new business, resolution approving SBRC request for increase in preschool students in the amount of $68,656.50.
Yeah, so this is just a resolution required. Robert, is this a one-time thing or is it
Yeah,
always?
no, this is a one-time thing because of our increase. A lot of schools have this, they've sent us a copy of all the schools that are eligible for this. Because of COVID, a lot of people have their preschool kids at home. And so we saw that increase the following year. And this is to get one-time funding for this through the SBRC.
You're just doing it to be nice.
No, it's just,
I don't do
it's-
it. Sorry.
what it is
Well, 'cause they
for that increase, what we taxed for last year was maybe, let's say, we had 30 kids in our preschool. This year we have 60. So because the way the tax is always in arrears, we wouldn't get that money for those kids, even though they're in our buildings until the following year. So what this does is it bridges that gap. It gives us current funding for those kids in the current year that we're in. So
I see. Okay, thank you. If you said that, it went, thank you. That.
Okay, do we have anyone who would like to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve the SBRC request for increase in preschool students.
And do we have a second? Okay, all those, roll call.
Yeah, all right.
Actually, she nudged me. Thank you, Carol.
A stickler.
Okay, roll call vote. Sorensen?
Here.
Meyer?
Aye.
Thanks.
Aye or nay?
Yeah,
Aye.
thanks.
Aye.
Core?
Aye.
Green?
Aye.
All ayes.
Motion carried.
Yep.
That's appropriate. Very good. Okay, superintendent's report.
Okay, it'll be a short one. Quick negotiations update. Our support staff group, I would throw a shout out to Katie Jordan, who's awesome. Requested information from the district already. They're going to get the ball rolling, and I really appreciate that. I would also give a shout out to Carol and Mark. Thank you for meeting with Robert and I to go through, a couple hours worth of negotiations prep work. And I think that's been something that we've done for the last few years now and really serves us well once we get going. It tends to take off fast and furious this time of year. So thanks to those of you that were Mark and Carol for serving on that committee. I've always believed it's the most stressful committee and most time consuming. So thank you for service on that. Some quick hitters on the legislative updates. I'll be sending something out to staff after spring break, but I did receive a phone call on Sunday from Representative John Thorpe. He has asked for a group or a cohort of our staff and community to come together for a focus group to provide feedback on different bills, different ideas, different concepts. I've never had a legislator ask for this. I was fairly impressed that he called back. So warned him that he might not like all the feedback. He understands that. So also committed to me that he would be voting no for the voucher bill. I haven't seen how that shook out today, but was happy to hear that because that's oftentimes party line politics. And Mr. Thorpe is a registered Republican, but somebody that thinks for himself up there, and I respect and appreciate that. Some bills that passed that I had to struggle with. There was a bill passed last week that made a lot of news around transgender athletes. I just would tell you as a board that we're obligated to follow the law, but I would also tell you I expect a lot of lawsuits brought forth on that topic that will call into question the validity of that bill. So stay tuned on that. When I'm asked about it, the thing I remind patrons is that our mission here is to serve and support all kids. So don't lose sight of that. And sometimes I think some aspects of the community get really wound up about issues like this, and I would just remind you that our mission is to serve all kids. There's a bill in the Senate, Senate File 2291. We're talking about it before the board meeting that would allow paras to serve as substitute teachers. That will be interesting to see what happens there. I think it speaks to the lack of substitute teachers more than anything. So stay tuned on that one. Another one, Carol, I'm going to try to get them in this bill after you. Senate File 2266 would increase the amount a retired IPERS employee can make and raise it to $50,000. So that's got the potential to be exciting. And then it also increases the amount that a school board member can earn. I believe it bumps it up to $20,000. So hopefully that passes because if you don't mind me calling attention to it, but in Carol's service on the board, she has to be very strategic about how often she can sell. And so once you hit a certain threshold and limit, you can't do it anymore. I think it's recognition of people like you that have recently retired, but also willing to come back and sub. And we need all the hands on deck and help we can get right now.
And up until this time, it hadn't been an issue because we had COVID, which took out the last 3 months. And then last year I didn't do it until January because of my hip replacement. So I had not even come close those years. So this was the year when I started out as a long-term sub. It went quickly.
Took a lot of your days. Last one I would point out to you, House Study Bill 727. So we want to keep an eye on. It's an AEA reorganization bill. Has the potential to try to shrink down the amount of AEAs. I would remind the board that AEA special education services are critical for us. We have an impossible time trying to replicate those. And so, I'm not convinced this bill, the way it reads, would do much good because it would spread the regions out so much that I worry that it wouldn't. The whole notion from legislators is that we have too many AEA chiefs and too many AEA assistant chiefs. And that might be true, but the way this is written up would just eliminate a chief job and create 2 more regional chiefs in different corners of the state. So I just don't understand the concept. And the AEA special education services are absolutely mission critical for us. So that'll be one I'm keeping a close eye on. Madam President, that's all I have.
All right. Okay, anybody have any additional comments, concerns, thoughts? Fellow school board members? All right. Make a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
All right, thank you, Ron. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Shane. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good job, Michelle.
Oh, boy,
Way to go.
Job, Michelle.
Way to go, Megan.
thank you.
Nice job.
I'm so glad I wanted to say the same motion.
I know.
You did.
I know, and then you read off the sheet.
I need to go back to SFA and terms.
Yeah, Mark.
Prerequisite.
Sounds good.
Think somewhere?